Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Joseph Rein, author of the book Youtopia. When not writing or reading, Joseph can be found hiking with his wife Jessica, playing cribbage, or recovering from various small injuries inflicted by his 4 children. In my book review, I stated Youtopia is a techno-thriller that still has me thinking. Annabelle Downer is an FBI agent assigned to find a murderer. However, this isn't an ordinary murder, but one that happened in cyberspace. Youtopia is a place where one can live in a perfect world of their own choosing every single day in a virtual reality environment. People tired of living life with all its ups and downs and disappointments can choose to immerse themselves into Youtopia, living out the rest of their days without pain, discomfort, or disease. As you can imagine, some people love the idea, and others abhor it. But who hates it enough to murder? This book is fast-paced and has plenty of twists and turns, especially as we see Annabelle's past and her connection to Youtopia. Mostly, it will make you think, what would you give up to have a perfect life? And is perfect really what you want after all? Today, I'm chatting with Joseph Rein, author of Youtopia. Welcome, Joseph.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited. Before we really get into the book, I want you to give our listeners just a quick elevator pitch. What are they going to get into when they read Youtopia?
Yeah, so the concept of Utopia, Y-O-U, is that people can sort of immerse into their own minds and live out what is their sort of perfect life based on where their mind wants to take them. And so for all different people, you can imagine this is all different things. It can be where you're on an exotic beach and you sort of live in relaxation. All the way to it can be if you are somebody who is really thrill-seeking and love to skydive and do all of that. But of course, you're never fully in danger there because it's perfection. So the creator of this, the character Sonia Young, has created this this sort of virtual mind space for individuals. And the premise of the novel, though, is that this has been a company that is sort of established for 10 years. After the prologue, we follow it, and the first chapter is 10 years later after the world. It's 2024, but the world has sort of accustomed itself to people potentially living in this space. But then somebody gets murdered. And so the plot of the book follows Annabelle Downer. She's an FBI agent, and she is tasked with finding out sort of who is so against this thing that and who has the know-how to hack this thing. So now they are trying to take this system down.
Right.
And so the novel is really sort of it's a murder mystery, right? It's a thriller in that sense, but it also, I think, for me, one of the interesting parts of the concept was just sort of exploring that idea of what it really means for somebody to have perfection in their own mind and where our minds would take us if we were allowed to just sort of live without consequence, without society.
Exactly. So it's a 2-for-1, folks. It's a thriller, and it makes you think about life. Youtopia has, Amazon has Youtopia listed as a techno-thriller.
Yes.
So how would you define that genre for us? And then tell me why you chose to write a techno-thriller genre.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, so to take your second part first, I don't know if I sort of actively sought out and said, I want to write this particular genre or this particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was conceptually in my mind. I had that idea for a long time. And the longer I sort of held off on the idea. It was like pre-Facebook, say, like pre-social media, when the idea was sort of starting in my mind. But then as technology started catching virtual reality, right? And as technology started catching up with the concept that I had in my mind, it was impossible now to separate the idea of sort of living in one's own mind space and technology. And so in that sense, it sort of had to become, or had to be, a techno-thriller just because of the concept itself. It did follow, so in some ways, influenced by a lot of other things that are considered technologically or techno-thrillers. Philip Dick's stories and the movies that are created off of them. Movies like The Matrix, like those sorts of things that kind of had their influence. Oh, there's my cat. Hi. And so to some degree, that was where it landed, right? The idea of a techno thriller is that technology, it's like, it's a subgenre of sci-fi, right? Technology is one aspect usually of technology is sort of ramped up, and is taken to its extreme. And then I'm going to get her out of here.
That's okay.
I stole her perch, right? Like, I'm in the best sunlight. And so she's very, very not happy about this. But so then the idea of sort of, well, now we have this technology, and in good sci-fi, of course, will take that technology, will extend it to its sort of logical extreme, but then will also, it has to have a story. And so I guess that's the thriller aspect of it, is that something needs to go wrong with this. There needs to be a plot and an angle to it that sort of pushes the envelope as far as it can go.
Right. I love that. So what do you think actually started you thinking about this idea of personal utopia, this idea of like living in your mind? You said you've had the idea for a long time.
Yeah.
Back before Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So, for any of our young listeners, there was a time before social media. What started that? Do you remember what the impetus was that made you go there?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was in college, I took a course on utopias and read a lot of utopian fiction. And of course, before that, I was interested in novels like 1984, Fahrenheit 451, right? Like those sort of perfect worlds gone awry.
Right.
And so I was really interested in even more so when I started reading the early Utopia stuff, like people who are genuinely and very earnestly attempting to make the world perfect, right? Not just better, but like, how can we perfect this thing called humanity? And of course, when it got to sorry, Belle, when it got to things like 1984 and dystopia and sort of cult phenomenons came, suddenly we couldn't imagine perfect worlds as good. All of a sudden they were perfect worlds as sort of bad. And so I was interested in both of those angles, like what would it mean to actually be perfect? And what were the tensions that were sort of causing that to not happen? And one of them, I guess one of the biggest things that I saw in all of these, it was the sort of the obvious fight between individualism and collective thought, right? Like, how can you sort of have your own perfection and satisfy yourself while also having to satisfy the needs of others? And that was the tension that almost, we struggle with this all the time, and it can never be sort of rectified. And one side would say, right, go entirely for yourself and everything in society will be better for it. Well, it's pretty ridiculous, right? We can see where that falls apart.
Right.
But on the other side, right, we're humans and we're self-serving, and we all have our wants and desires, and those are going to clash, and we can't stop that. We can't just be wholly altruistic and subservient to others. Like, we have to have our own goals and drives. And so for me, the concept of this novel came from, well, if we're going to, and I was writing it in something else, and I wasn't really taking it seriously. I was just sort of having characters joke about it. It's like, well, if it's going to be perfect, you're going to have to just live in your own mind by yourself. You're never going to be able to talk to anyone else. You're never going to be able
Right.
to have a wife or a family, right, or any of that sort of stuff. And so that was where it sort of started. And then as novels and as writers will know, if an idea is good for me, it just won't leave me alone.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to come out, or otherwise it's just going to stay in there. And so as the years went by and social media started, and actually what kind of happened to the idea is it kind of morphed, because you see social media and you see online places where if somebody wants to believe something, they can probably find somebody who will agree with them, and they can sort of follow that tunnel
Right.
to where their world they're living in and the truths that they live are completely different than even their neighbors and somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it sort of became like, oh, I need to sort of like take this thing seriously. And then, of course, when you see virtual reality headsets and people sort of living in that space, people in their phones instead of out, all of a sudden it became all of these parallels that was like, oh, this is actually an interesting topic that's not just, oh, it would be in somebody's mind. This might actually be a choice that we're going to be making fairly soon. Like, do we want to live amongst one another and have interactions like this? Or do we just want to kind of do our own thing and be happy there? Because it would be very tempting, right? For a lot of people, for me, for anyone to sort of say, well, this is, I wouldn't know the difference. I would feel that this is very real and genuine. The people and the places and all of that would feel it would be my world. Except it would just be positive for me all the time. I mean, who wouldn't be lured in by that?
Yeah, there is a bit of a lure to that idea. Of course, as you read the book, then you start to think, oh, I don't know, maybe maybe not so much, right?
Yeah.
So I liked that. I really liked the idea. I love the idea too that this utopia is so different from so many other utopian books, which are like the whole world, right? And we all have to conform to what someone else determined utopia was. Whereas this is a self-determined utopia.
Right.
And not only is it self-determined, but each person gets to self-determine their own. So just because I said this is what utopia was, it doesn't affect you at all, because you get to have your own. And I that was kind of a very cool concept and very different from other utopian type books.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
and for me, and to go back to what you said at the first part, where it sort of starts to feel like, oh, maybe this is not such a good thing. That was the part that when I was writing it, in the sort of first drafts or so, it was there, but I wasn't exactly, I guess I wasn't fully conscious of the fact that I was writing something where it sort of questioned that idea of like, oh, this would be great for me and I'd just be happy, and years would go by and I would just be in this sort of bliss. It started getting me on that question, that road of like, where would our minds go if we were constantly positively reinforced? And for me, I think that was what where a lot of the like the mystery of the murder and those angles came in, is because I was toying with that idea of like, well, when we're kids, even when we're adults, if we do something and we get pleasure from it or we enjoy it, it's like we're more likely to do that thing again.
Exactly.
That thing doesn't have to be good or bad or anything, right? That thing can be anything. And so it becomes this like a sort of like a slippery slope of it, where it could start off fairly innocuous or fairly light, but then it could very quickly sort of slide down that rabbit hole.
Right. I enjoyed that. So I was going to ask you, you've kind of answered it a little bit, but this idea of like, given the chance, would you immerse yourself into this utopia?
Yeah.
And, why or why not? Like, can you see if this were real, if someone offered this to you, is this someplace that you would personally go, or would you, like one of the characters who was so staunchly against it, would you
Yeah.
be preaching against it? Like, where do you fall?
Yeah. That's, I'm going to answer that, and then I want to turn it back to you and have you
Yeah.
answer too.
Yeah.
Because that's actually one of my favorite responses to the book so far, has been people sort of saying, like, it made me think about what I would do in this, and would I or would I not, or what would that be for me. And so the character you're referencing, his name is Terrence Martin, and he's a character. He was very fun to write. Because he's somewhat of a villain of sorts, or at least he's so against Utopia, he takes the opposite stand.
Right.
And I think looking at that chapter that I wrote, it was from his perspective, his sort of place to tell his story. And a lot of what comes out of that, I think maybe would be me, is that he, in a particular moment in his life, it did seem like a good idea. And I think back to certain moments in my life when I was hurting, or when I lost somebody, when it would feel easier to just say,
Yeah.
allow me to go into this space that either erases that loss, right, or couches that loss in a particular way so that it doesn't, I don't have to grieve, and I won't probably have to grieve again. Utopia is a place where my cat would live forever,
Right.
or produce offspring that's very similar, and it would just be this sort of cycle where I wouldn't have to grieve any particular loss. My kids would always be healthy, and would grow to full adulthood and would get good jobs and all of that. So I think for me, the answer is there are certainly moments in my life that I can think back to where it would have been incredibly tempting, and making that sort of like lifelong decision in those difficult moments. It's hard to say that's a good thing, because today, now, in this moment, I certainly wouldn't, because I think for all life struggles, for me, I agree with Terrence, and one of Terrence's large stances against this, is the idea of chance or possibility, and the idea that I like particular things. And if I were to sort of immerse in Utopia, my brain is already set with the set amount of things. And maybe it would create new art. Maybe it would create new foods. Maybe it would allow for that. But I think more likely it would just sort of tunnel into more deeply the things that I already like, and just make me sort of super fan like those things more, and just give me more and more of that. Terrence calls it the all thumbs of existence. It's why when I go to a restaurant, I try not to order the same thing. I'm the type of person who's like, if there's something interesting on the menu that I think, oh, that might not work, but I want to try it because I want to see. And I think for me, the idea of Utopia might be too narrowing, in that sort of, I can't, maybe my best friend in my life, I haven't even met yet. Right. It's those sorts of things. So I think that is where I would land on it today. But of course, right, if I am diagnosed with cancer, and there is a character in the book who is terminally ill, and can have and the idea is can have a better life, free of the pains and of those, even if they won't necessarily live longer or anything like that. Then I would change. So I think if the offer were always on the table, and this is my main character, Annabelle, she is investigating this thing, but she's very curious about it, right? And so she asks all of these different characters, like, why haven't you, right? Or have you considered it?
Right.
Because she's curious as to why somebody would say otherwise. Why aren't we all just doing this thing?
Yeah. Or why aren't we all against it? Why are some people for and some people not? And it's in the same way that I think a lot of techno-thrillers, or a lot of technology works that I've read recently, deal with the question of privacy, which we're all concerned about. And for my part, I'm always like, yes, privacy is important, but why? We can't just say we need privacy. We need to explain
why it is that private
Right.
for intimacy between people, right? For this sort of self-preservation, we need to be able to say that. And I think in the same way, yeah, on a sort of asking like, why are we staying here? We need to define why we need to fight for this existence when there is the sort of the easy button existence out there.
Right. Right. Something that you said that I found really interesting was that there were times, like when things were hard, that looked like the right answer. And my husband and I rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle. So 3,102 miles.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
It was crazy. And there was one day in particular that was very tough, overly hard. It was a 70-mile day. It was very hot. We had 3 flat tires. It was a horrible day.
Yeah.
So we get to the end of that day and I thought, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I am done with this bicycle ride. And I was blogging and I actually put out on the blog, I don't know, guys, I think we might be done. This isn't fun. We also had the wind blowing the wrong way. So we had a headwind the whole day. It was just a horrible day. And I had a friend reach out to me and say, I would understand if you'd quit. What you've done already is amazing. However, I have a piece of advice. Don't quit on a bad day.
Yeah.
You'll always wonder if you had stuck with it. And it's kind of what you said there. It's that same thing. Like you wouldn't want to make a decision like immersing yourself in a utopia on a bad day.
Yeah.
You want to do it when life is more normalized and then make a decision, because then you're making a decision not out of fear or not out of pain or not out of grief or not out of one of the negative things, but out of, I've weighed all of my decisions.
Yeah.
And I would like, and like you, yeah, I'm sure it would be tempting. I'm sure there were times where it would be very tempting to just say, you know what, I'm going to go live in my own head, do my own thing, and let all of you people rot because I'm tired of all of this, right? Or I can't deal with the pain I'm in anymore, or I can't deal with the pain someone I love is in anymore. But generally speaking, when you look at life overall, you know, the good and the bad is who's made me who I am.
Right.
Who would I be without all of those tough things that happened?
And there's certainly something rewarding, right? And I touch on this a little bit too. There's a character who's in Utopia, who's an artist who only achieves fame in his own mind. And you know, he feels, and would it be any different in your bike ride if it was in Utopia, right? And I love riding bike too. I can't imagine 3 tires. I can't imagine. On a single day, but but if you achieve that in Utopia, you would still feel that sense of achievement. But on the other side of it, looking in, right, I question that sort of thing. I've been writing for probably my whole life, right? I was the little kid who was writing in notebooks while we were driving long distances and things, and it took, Utopia, the novel itself, I started writing it in 2018, so 2024, right? So 6 years from when I began it to publication. If I were in Utopia, that would have been much faster. It probably would have been much easier, all of that sort of stuff.
Well, and it would already be a bestseller, and it'd be turning into a movie. Right?
I would be doing 100 of these onlines for authors a day.
Exactly.
But there is something, I think there just is something to be said about humans not really accepting or appreciating things that come too easily too. I think we have a strive and determination and the sort of like trailblazing, like, I discovered this, I created this, I felt this, and it really does have to come. I think it just feels more rewarding when it comes from some strife, from some struggle.
Well, I tell everyone, I feel like life is, there's 2 sides to everything. And, if you don't experience some really hard, difficult things, then I don't think that you can appreciate when it isn't hard.
Yeah.
Like how do you know what joy is if you haven't experienced something opposite of that? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like the opposites really make life what it is. And so maybe if you went into Utopia and you'd already lived 60 years and you had some understanding of what, but
Right.
Utopia young would be really scary to me, because
Right.
what would you want? What would you think? You know, I imagine, like, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and if she were to go to a Utopia right now, what would she want? Well, she would want chicken nuggets, and she would want, you know,
Bluey. Yeah.
yeah. Do you know what, like,
Yeah.
and you think about that and you think, and what all would you miss?
Yeah, for sure.
You
And
know,
actually, the interesting thing is, so the follow-up novel, the sequel to this,
yes.
is going to be titled Utopia Reborn, and it is going to dive more into that aspect of like the developing mind and how Utopia would affect that versus how it would affect an established adult who already
Yeah.
has those sort of societal expectations. And yeah, so that was one thing that I was very interested in, that the first novel couldn't really, because there just wasn't space for it.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. Just that question of, you know, if we push it to like there's only joy, or you know, we push to the extremes, which kids very often do, right? And they're very sort of like straightforward minded on certain things. What happens then? And so the second book is going to take, I won't say too much about that, but
Yeah.
it is going to
Sorry.
sort of take on that question for sure.
Wonderful. So I'm curious, just because I know how difficult it is to write characters that are significantly different from me. And your
Yeah.
FBI character is a woman.
Yeah.
And first of all, we often don't see books with FBI characters as women, not the
Yeah.
main character. It's often a man. And
Yep.
so I like that you put her as a woman, but I'm curious, how hard was it, Joseph, to get into the mind of a woman FBI agent's mind? Like, is it
Yeah.
hard for you to write women characters?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually not. In the sort of the difficulty, and I wish I could tell you why. It's something I've been doing since the beginning, and I think maybe one way to think of it for me is that you know, the stereotypes that get placed upon males and females. I skew towards the female myself. When it comes to you know, a non-aggressive and, you know, empathetic and you know, if it means that the character cares a lot about their family and isn't completely this, then yes, I skew female anyways, and so it comes a bit naturally more for me to write
Okay.
female characters. For this particular one, though, for Anna, I wanted, there are two aspects of her character, and that first one, as you mentioned, is the FBI agent, female
Yeah.
FBI agent. When I started reading into it and reading accounts of the FBI, in particular the females in the FBI, it was very clear to me that this character needed to be a female, because females are not given the respect that they deserve necessarily in this field, and for
Right.
those very reasons, where they're always portrayed as males and they're always portrayed as needing to be of a certain personality. And so it gave her sort of like an edge and an inherent ability to show strength when she was just able to sort of step in and not take people's crap about
Right.
things. Or there's an aspect of when she first starts investigating this murder, and she's standing there in front of this gigantic screen and watching it, and the person from Utopia, he sort of says, like, maybe we should fast forward through, like, sort of in that like
Oh, this is a woman standing here. Yeah.
paternal protective way,
Yeah. Right.
where she can just be like, I've seen worse, play it, right? Like, no, you're not
Right.
going to put me in that position.
Right.
And it was nice to have that sort of inherent conflict and inherent ability for her to sort of push up against. The second part was, and this isn't revealing too much of the book because it comes fairly early, but so Anna has has a past, sort of a tortured past in some ways. She lost a daughter when her daughter Charlotte, when she was very young. And so that is one part of her pull towards Utopia, is like wondering what her life would be like if she didn't have to live with the pain of losing
that pain. Yeah.
that child. And the reason why I wanted her to be a female character dealing with this is because I think it does take more strength to experience that grief and to feel it and to go through that pain. And her husband, Paul, who is sort of non-existent in their life, it is on the other end of that spectrum, right? Is not dealing with it. And so I wanted her to be a female in that sense, because I think showing how, right, like how strong she is in dealing with the grief of losing a child.
Yes.
It was important for me to sort of portray that side of it.
Awesome. So I read your bio. You write across genres. You've got short stories, you screenwrite, you do something called critical essays. What is a critical essay?
So mostly what I've been, because I'm also a teacher. I'm also a professor of creative writing. And so most of those critical essays are essays on teaching or on writing itself.
Okay. Yeah. So you do all of that. You're writing this techno-thriller. I know you've got another one that you've talked about, right? Utopia Returns.
Yep.
Do you have anything else out there that's coming up? And are they all going to be thrillers, or do you see yourself doing other things?
Yeah, that's so yeah, I'm in the for now and for maybe the next year and a half, I'm in the Utopia world.
Right.
Which is good, right? Like another part of techno-thrillers, of sci-fi, of the sci-fi like fantasy-ish genres, is that readers like series. Yeah. And so when you finish the first book,
they want to see 8 more. Yeah.
You want more. You want more, right? Yeah, right. And as an author, that's a blessing and curse. You love it, right? And it's great. My kids, just 2 of my kids finished the Hunger Games recently, and they're like, "Why aren't there more?"
Right.
And I was like, maybe she wanted to.
Maybe she was just done with those characters, sweetheart. You know.
Exactly. And so for me, yeah, Utopia Reborn will come out in November. I'm putting the finishing touches on that, and then the book 3, which I have started, which I will dive into wholeheartedly once Reborn is. In fact, book 3 is going to be titled Youtopia Infinity, and that's going to be probably in the spring.
Okay.
And at that point, as you say, like whether or not it continues on from there, I don't envision it being more than 4. And that would sort of depend upon whether or not I have something interesting to say about it.
Right.
Yeah, you can write 16, 20 page, you can sort of do those series, but I think most important for me is like, is this concept, am I sort of spinning my wheels?
Right.
And Utopia Reborn takes on a different aspects of it, looking at sort of if this were sort of taken and shrunken down and looking only at the specific, in this case, youth, that specific age group. Utopia Infinity is going to sort of take it and blow it up. It's gonna go, what happens if we were to potentially be able to share these spaces? So now it's not just individual, but it's individual while also sharing, which is a dance that I'm working on.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. But for me, yeah, it's taking the concept in a different way, and it's exploring it differently. So that's why I think it's working for me. And at that point, I may have one more, because I have a little bit of an idea for a 4th, but so either that or not. From there, as far as the other sorts of writings go, I have been active in screenwriting. Screenwriting is an interesting place because, as I always say, things happen very slowly until they don't. And so we do have 2 or 3, I think 3, but 2 that I really actually am sort of proud of, scripts that are out there that we're attempting to get made, that we're shopping, that and Hollywood is such a fickle and difficult industry. So to get anything made at all
Right.
amazes
It's
me.
crazy, right?
It doesn't have, Brad Pitt or whoever, right? Zendaya. And so we've got 2 scripts out there, and every now and then something will sort of come of it, and I'll hear about, oh, we've got this and this actor and this other thing, and it's like, okay, great, here we go. Those scripts are both in the same vein. They're sort of psychological thrillers, murder mystery-ish kind of thing, and it does seem like the longer I write, the more I gravitate
to that.
Towards it. Yeah. I used to write in my first collection of short stories, and a lot of my short stories were sort of literary small town fiction. I grew up in Wisconsin, and so a lot of it was sort of centered around that. And I really, really did enjoy that. But I think the more I watch, the more I read, the more I write, I'm gravitating towards that sort of those psychological thriller fiction. I think there's also something that I started early on in sort of pandemic time when I had sort of more time to write it, and I think that's turning into a fantasy thing, but I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know if I'll pursue it. I don't know if that'll come about, but I foresee that being potentially, I'm going to revisit that once I'm done with Utopia. It has very dystopian feel to it, kind of similarly. So it's in that genre, but it would also sort of take it in a different way. And so we'll see.
Yeah. So what I like about this is very much what you said earlier about living life. There's always hope and possibility.
Yeah.
And so what you see yourself as a writer is yes, right now thriller seems to be where you are, but that doesn't mean that you believe you'll always be there, and you never know what might pop up that will turn into something else.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a real danger with writers. It's a danger and a possibility and all wonderful, but also you think about like who your favorite writers are, and they are, you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell, maybe it's by the sentences or maybe it's by something, but you can sort of tell, oh, it's that person's book. And so, especially when I'm teaching, I always want students to try new things, because I'm like, you might think this is your thing, but you're not, you
don't know. You don't know until you know, right?
Yeah, you're not out there yet, right? You don't.
Right.
So don't lock in, and don't only read that, and don't only write that, right? Like sort of explore, read other things, etc. But also, at some point, and you do have to meet readers halfway on things, right? Like if they expect, if you write a really good techno-thriller, right? If my next novel is a romance that has nothing to do with technology,
Right.
et cetera, like they might be like, this, I wasn't expecting this.
Right.
And so you do have to sort of follow a thread, even if that thread sort of gets frayed as it goes.
I tell people all the time that I'm a character-driven fiction author, and I try not to put myself into a genre, because I have a lot of ideas, and it's usually around a character. And sometimes the character needs to be hisfic, and sometimes the character needs to be somewhere else. And I tell people, if you like a good character, if you like to watch a character go on a journey, you'll like my books. And I hope that people don't just like pigeonhole me, because I don't like pigeonholes. I don't do well in them. So
Right. Well, and that reminds me too, like, thrillers are known for plot, right?
Yeah.
Very plot-driven stories.
Exactly.
And I don't consider myself a plot-driven person, but I think when I'm asked that question, like, is it character or plot, or where's the balance, et cetera? I think for me, the characters, to your writing, right? Characters always have to drive the plot, right? Like the plot might be set in this world, or it might be set here, or it might be set there, but it's what the characters do and make of it that's gonna drive the world. So yeah, I'm always sort of character focused in that same way.
Yeah. So I want to let everyone know that if you're enjoying this book discussion, head on over to Novels and Latte Club on Facebook. As a member of this amazing community, you'll have the opportunity to win a digital copy of Utopia by Joseph Rein. All right. So the link is in the show notes. So head right on over, and we're going to have a digital copy that's available to you. So Joseph, if someone wanted to talk with you about Utopia, about further Utopia books, about your writing in general, how do they reach out to you?
You can go to my website is probably the easiest way. So my website is just josephrein.com.
Mhm.
I have a link for emailing on there,
Okay.
and that's the fastest way to reach out to me and the easiest way to remember, because it's just my name.com.
Right.
And yeah, I would love to. I mean, one of the best things about writing, as a writer, we can spend so much time in our laptops or in our own heads, in sort of creating and doing all of these things. And so being able to, if somebody reads the book and they have ideas about it or questions about it, I mean, as an author, it doesn't get any better than
I
that.
know it is. It's the best thing in the world as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. Okay,
Yeah.
so I will have those links in the show notes. So anyone who wants to reach out to Joseph, that's how you do it. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been wonderful getting to know you and to talk about your book, Utopia.
Terry, I appreciate it so much. I can't tell you how much. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone out there for listening. And yeah, if you read and enjoy Utopia, I would love to hear about it. I'd love to see the reviews on Goodreads or anything, like with
Yep.
ideas.
Put out those reviews, people.
I just love, yeah, and I just love reading it, right? And I love even ones that where they're critiques, and I'm like, yes, I see, I understand that, I see that.
Yeah.
Any sort of time that we get feedback as writers, we love it. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Joseph.
thank you, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.